Guy asked me to get up here and talk about the future. And it's a festival, so I'm supposed to be festive, but the future kind of freaks me out. So I'm gonna try and do a hopeful story. So yeah, this is me as a teenager, defining myself by what I'm against. You know, like I would have called myself an anti-capitalist, anti-system, anti-business. I went to high school. At the end of high school, my careers advisor said, you know, what are you into? I said, maths and science, and they said you should go study engineering. So I, graduated 4 years later with an engineering degree. And that whole time at uni, like, never once thought about what do I actually want to do. I was just sort of like going along. Yeah, okay, makes sense. Then I graduated in 2008, and some drunken bankers had ruined the economy, so I couldn't get a job. So I was sitting there on the dole, and actually I tell you what, the dole is awesome because you have some time to yourself and no one telling you what to do. So for the first time in my life, I actually got to go like, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? And it took me a long time to figure out, and I'm still figuring it out, but at the age of about 22, a light bulb went off. I was like, I'm a musician, I studied electronics, maybe I could make electronics for musicians. So that's how Rich Decibel was born. I guess Rich Decibels was like my inspiration, the thing that I want to do is make weird noise machines. I finally found something that was like inspiring. This is a thing that freaks my brain. Through making these devices, I found a community of people that were weird and creative and angry like me, but they were doing something. And that was, the word they call it now was creative activism, and it was a real breakthrough for me to have something to keep me occupied and keep me talking to people and growing. And speaking of Occupy, that creative activism took me to the Occupy camp in Wellington in 2011, and that was mind-blowing for me. We popped a village up out in the middle of the city out of nowhere, and it felt like when we had 3,000 camps around the world overnight without a boss, it felt like we can change the world and we don't need to ask anyone's permission. We did everything by consensus, so this is us sitting in circles, making decisions where we're trying to hear everyone's voice and include everyone. And that was a revolutionary idea, that we don't need a boss, we can actually figure it out together. And that was, of course, when the system was working well, when you actually were in a space that was hosted correctly and there was a protocol. When it wasn't going so well, it was a bit like this, the Ukrainian parliament, where the space just gets dominated by the loudest person, and this idea of doing everything inclusively actually crumples under the weight of the loudest voices. And so a bunch of us, while being inspired by Occupy and aware of the crushing frustrations of it, thought, how can we bypass some of the problems of time and space? And so we met in Spiral, this crazy loopy thing that you can see on the screen. And we said to them, can you help us make something on the internet that gets the good bit of collective decision making and gets past the bad bit? And so that's what we've been doing. That's called Loomio. We started 3.5 years ago. And Spiral gave us some space in their beautiful office, and they made 1 million great introductions for us. And so we got our first, the crappiest, cheap prototype out in the first couple of weeks, and immediately realized that a lot of people really care about this idea of decision making online. So we crowdfunded ourselves some support so we could take this crappy prototype and turn it into a real product. And now there's tens of thousands of groups around the world that have used Loomio. This is one of them in Wellington. They're an arts collective that host a free community space that anyone can use. We've got awesome social movements in Taiwan and Hungary and Spain. Currently there's a collective of 20 African nations that are currently collaborating about the UN Sustainability Development Goals. There's lots of different awesome groups doing lots of different awesome stuff on Loomio, and the thing that they've all got in common is that they're all trying to make the world and the future more awesome, which is a really fortunate place for me to be in, to get to connect with all these groups all the time. It gives me a lot of energy and enthusiasm. Now Loomio is run by a co-op of 17 members. So that means we don't have a boss. It means we're all responsible for the work and we're all responsible for each other, and we've had to develop a lot of systems for managing an organization across multiple time zones with all these different people, where you don't have a boss and you're actually trying to look after each other. And so now we're in a position nearly where we're making a living out of making the world better, which is awesome. So this is me. I'm 30 now. I'm old, woo, a smartphone. So it's time for me to retire and just stop working so hard and just hand out advice that you don't want to hear. So I've got some advice. Advice number 1, define yourself by what you're into, not just what you're against. That's a real big one. So this is one of my crazy machines I made, and I was into that for a few years, and it really got me on a track to momentum. You've got to figure out what you're into, you know, but it'll take the time to do it, but fuck what everyone else thinks about it. It's what you're into, you know. The second piece of advice, once you've found the thing that you're into, is find the others. It's really fun to do stuff on your own, but it's so much more powerful if you can connect with other people. Collaboration, like, it's a skill, it's hard work, you've got to practice it. And you've got to acknowledge that your idea is only ever going to be a tiny fraction of the truth. You need to have everyone working together if you're actually going to make something that people care about. And advice number 3, if you do want to change the world, and you don't have to, but if you do, you have to be guided by real people and real needs. And that means you have to talk to people, you have to connect with people, you need to try a million things, and you need to talk to a million people. You should talk to me. I've got my Twitter thing on there so you can talk to me. That's what it's there for. And I guess my last piece of advice is don't ever take advice from people on stage. And the bigger the stage, the less you should trust them. So what you should do instead is listen to your guts. And that's, I'm dead serious about that. Guts for me is the most important thing. You've got to take the time to see what's in your guts. And in your guts, you might find that you're angry about some injustice, or you might find that you're really depressed about the future, or that you're cynical, or whatever it is. But that feeling in your guts is telling you what you should do and how you should do it. So tune in with your guts, surround yourself with people that are good to you, and then get to work.